All praise to the Most High, Ahayah, and to His Son, Yeshua, the Messiah. Hallelujah. This is Brother Holly here on the third broadcast, this set apart Sabbath day, on the AHAYAH'S channel with the Spirit of Truth broadcast. This third broadcast will be a little bit special. I'm going to give my personal testimony of what happened when I stopped tithing. Now, I've never given this testimony on any platform at any time. I have told people my story, but I've never put it out there to the general public in this way. So this is a special broadcast, and I've been compelled by the Spirit of the Most High to put this out there so that the people of the Most High will hear from the Scriptures what their responsibilities are and what the penalty is, if any, for not following their responsibilities. Y'all all right? I hope so. Let's go. We're going to first look in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 14. Let's start reading at verse 22. Thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed, that the field bringeth forth year by year. Verse 23. And thou shalt eat before AHAYAH thy Elohim, in the place which he shall choose to place his name there, the tithe of the corn, the tithe of the wine, the tithe and of the oil, and the firstlings of the herds of thy flocks, that thou mayest learn to fear AHAYAH your Elohim always. And if the way be too long for you, so that you are not able to carry it, or if the place be too far from you, which AHAYAH thy Elohim shall choose to set his name there, when AHAYAH thy Elohim has blessed you, then shall you turn it into money, and bind up the money in your hand, and you shall go to the place where AHAYAH thy Elohim shall choose. And you shall bestow that money for whatsoever your soul lusts for oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink, or for whatsoever your soul desires, and you shall eat there before AHAYAH thy Elohim, and shall rejoice, you and your household. Wow. So according to the Scriptures, it's the tithe of the flock and the tithe of the field. Tithe was something to eat. And according to the Scriptures, you would gather it up. And it was called the year of tithing. Once a year, you would gather it up, the tithe. You wouldn't tithe week by week or month by month. It would be once a year. And it would be stuff you grew in the field, or the additions to your herds in your flocks. And if it was too far, you would go to the place where the Most High placed his name. We know that is Jerusalem. So you only tithe in one place. That was Jerusalem. And once a year you would take your tithe. And if it was too far for you, it was too much and too far, you could turn it into money. But when you arrived in Jerusalem, you had to turn it back into something to eat and drink. And you could even buy strong drink with it. You could buy yourself some liquor with it. It says right here, you can bestow the tithe, and you could turn it back into from money to liquor, and you were to eat and make merry with you and your household before AHAYAH, the great I am, and rejoice before him, that you would learn to fear him. So we have a big party. That's not what's going on, is it, in the tithe taking, pork chop eating, Sunday go to meeting churches? That tithe is being gathered up and turned into a big house for the pastor, a new car for the pastor and his family, college education for his family, his children, all sorts of things that he's doing, or she is doing in some cases, with the tithe of these poor people that they have duped into giving it to them. I say duped. I stopped tithing in about, I want to say, 2012. I came to a realization from studying the subject in the scriptures for multiple times over multiple years, that money tithing was not found anywhere in the scriptures. And this is the only place when it talked about tithing that you could turn it into money, but you had to turn it right back into something to eat. And I knew that those charlatans that were standing before me in those Constantine Christian churches were basically misrepresenting the truth when they talk about tithing being money and tithing being a principle. No, tithing was not a principle. It was a duty. If you grew something in the field, or if you grew something, if your flocks multiplied and you were blessed, it said right here, if you were blessed, then you had to do it. It was a commandment from the Most High. Did not Yahshua say when he was on the earth that the Pharisees tithe of mint, cumin, and other spices, but they had forgotten the weightier matters of the law, like justice, righteousness. He said, this you should do, but not to leave the other undone. Because even Yahshua understood that tithing was a command. But it was only a command for the people who grew something or had flocks. When the Messiah was on the earth, his family occupation was carpenter. We don't have any record whatsoever of the Messiah ever paying tithes. We have no record of his disciples ever paying tithes. All but one of his disciples, that I remember correctly, were fishermen. One was a tax collector. I think another was a scribe, if I remember correctly. But the vast majority of them were fishermen. And it doesn't talk about taking fish, a tenth of your catch, and taking it to the priest. Because fish could not be used as a sacrifice. And the book of Nehemiah gives instructions that for every meat offering that was brought, or for every meat sacrifice that was presented, a tenth of it was taken and put in what was known as the treasure room at the temple in Jerusalem. And this tithe of the tithe was so that the priests could eat, that the priest's family could eat, that the porters could eat, that the singers could eat, that there would be meat in the house. That's the meat in the house that it talks about in Malachi. Actual food stuff. So when I stopped tithing in 2014, I had approximately, I'll just round it off, I probably had about $50,000 in debt. Credit cards, cars, and a mortgage on a home. When I stopped tithing, within 3 years, I had paid all that off. And I was able to set aside and pay enough money to pay off my youngest son's Florida prepaid college. My youngest son right now is going to college for free because I had the sufficient income and sufficient monies to pay into the Florida prepaid college fund at the university level, at the highest level, so that he could go anywhere in the state, any college, university, whatever, in the state, for free. He could get a bachelor's degree for free. He will leave college with a degree, most high willing, and he will not owe a single dime in student loans. All praise to the Most High. That's because I had the money, because I stopped giving money away behind a misappropriated scripture or set of scriptures. I quit believing the lie. I never saw any windows of heaven pouring out me blessings. Now, the windows of heaven's first mention was in the days of Noah, when the Most High opened the windows of heaven and poured out rain. And when you have an agricultural community or agricultural nation like the nation of Yasharal was in ancient times, especially during ancient times, that rain was the most important thing. A drought was a judgment. Drought would bring forth famine, which is also a judgment. But to open up the windows of heaven and be poured out a blessing would be to receive the former and the latter rains, that you would have an abundant crops. You would have abundant crops, not just for you to eat, but for your cattle and your sheep and your goats and all your herd animals to eat the grass and the grain. That you would have plenty of food. And you would be in a delightsome land, a land that's flowing. The flow was dependent upon the rain. And the Most High would shut the rain down if you disobeyed it. And here's a commandment. And I was able not only to pay off my debts, but I was able to develop a cash usage system where I would no longer use credit for anything. I would no longer charge anything or establish any loans. I would get cars with cash, furniture with cash, homes with cash. Everything is paid for in cash. I save it up, pay it off. Save it up, buy it. I don't get nothing on time. Why is that? In just a little bit further down in Deuteronomy 15, we see this prohibition from the Most High. Let's read it. Deuteronomy 15:5. It says, only if you carefully hearken unto the voice of AHAYAH, your Elohim, to observe to do all these commandments which I command you this day. For AHAYAH, your Elohim, blesses you, as he promised you, and you shall lend unto many nations, but you shall not borrow. And you shall reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over you. Now, when you borrow, when you establish a loan, the book of Proverbs says in Proverbs 22:7 that that the borrower is servant to the lender. Is that not the same connotation that the Most High is trying to get across to you here? I'm talking about lending and not borrowing. He said that you will reign over other nations won't reign over you. When you become a borrower, the lender now is reigning over you. The lender sets the interest rate. The lender charges you late fees if you miss a payment. The lender will take your possessions. If you don't pay the loan, they'll just come and take your stuff to satisfy the loan. You are a slave to them. You can't give freely or as the Most High directs you. Why? You got to satisfy that debt. You've become indebted. The Most High is blessing you to keep you out of debt so that you may be a blessing to others. So you have money to freely give. That if you see the poor and struggling, having a need. Who are the poor, Brother Holly? Anybody less fortunate than yourself. A person can be made the poor by losing their job. So many people during this pandemic lost their jobs. I was blessed to keep my job and to move up during the pandemic. All praise to the Most High. But during that time, I was able to help those around me who were struggling. And I've helped people in the past greatly, because since I stopped tithing, I have all this income, all these resources at my disposal. I was giving 5 figures, children, to those storehouse churches in my ignorance. 5 figures a year and getting nothing back. Nothing back. And I knew of a young man who lost his job, and he went to the same storehouse church I used to go to, a Sunday go to meeting church, tithe takers, pork chop eaters. And he asked the elders, could he receive something back since he lost his job, he was going to lose his home, his kids were going to go hungry, his wife was going to go hungry, they were destitute. And they told him to pray. We will pray about it. We'll pray with you. That's telling somebody exactly what the scriptures say not to tell them. You know, saying be blessed, be warmed in clothing. You don't give them what's necessary. That event was the impetus that I needed to cut these people off. And COVID made it really easy. I just never went back. Hallelujah. But when I found out about what happened to this brother, I went to my bank account and wrote him a check with enough money to cover his mortgage for 3 months, to feed his family for 3 months, to pay his bills for 3 months, to clothe his kids for 3 months, to put gas in their car for 3 months, to handle all their expenses for 3 months. And at the end of that 3 months, he was able to secure work in another state, and I gave him another blessing in the 5-figure area, so he wouldn't have to sell his house here, and he would have enough money to move his household to another state. I did all of that, children, in the same year. I bought a brand new vehicle for my youngest son that had 11 miles on it. Vehicle had 11 miles on it. I went to the dealership with my son at around his 16th birthday and purchased that vehicle for him. And I was glad to do it. It blessed me to do it. If you have it in your hand to do, then do. And the Most High kept it in my hand, put all this in my hand, because he knows my heart, and I wasn't being deceived anymore. And I refused to borrow. I obey his word. He said, you shall lend unto many, and you shall not borrow. I look at the you shall not borrow command the same way I look at thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery. I look at it in the same spirit. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Look at it in the same way. You shall not bow before idols. You won't cut it. I look at it in the same way, children. I won't borrow. I have seen people, children, maybe you have too. Maybe you've done it. I've seen people put burgers and fries on a credit card. Come on, the meal costs $11, now it costs you $15. That's crazy, children. It's crazy. And debit cards are no worse because you never feel, when you have the money in your hand, you actually feel it. If you give somebody a $100 bill, you feel that. But if you just hand them a debit card, they charge you one-on-one. And then they charge you a fee for using debit. I ain't never been charged a fee for using cash. Ever. Never will. So, I'm here to encourage you, children. If you're still paying tithes, look at what the scriptures say tithe is. Tithe is food. According to Leviticus 27, it's the tithe of the field and the tithe of the flock. Unless you're a farmer, and unless you're giving up food stuff to your storehouse, but they won't take a bushel of corn, or they won't take a side of beef, or 10 lambs if you had 100 lamb produce in the year. They won't take 10 of them. What are they gonna do with them? But they want that money. But you just tell them, nope, it's the tithe of the field, tithe of the flock, and don't listen to their reasonings or their janglings. Don't let them convince you that it's the principle and not the actual words. No, it's the actual words. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out the mouth of AHAYAH. We live by every word, and food is food. Don't let them fool you that it's not food. And when you have an opportunity to bless somebody, when you've paid off all your debts, when you're not paying interest anymore. Children, I haven't paid interest in 5 years. Not one penny of interest in 5 years. Wow. Got a couple-year-old car sitting out there in the driveway right now. Paid for cash. Bought it cash. They delivered it cash. I gave him the cash. Wrote the check the same day. Like I said, my son riding around in a new ride right now. I paid cash for. Got furniture downstairs. Going to buy some new furniture for my bedroom. All going to be cash purchases. Cash purchases. Why am I able to do all this cash? I'm not giving my money away to a bunch of charlatans. Take care of the poor among you. If you see a brother have need, take care of him. You see a sister have need, take care of them. You will have the money in your hand, and when you quit giving it to those charlatans. When you cease giving it away to them tithe-taking, pork chop eating, Sunday go to meeting jokers. Here at AHAYAH'S house, you will never see me ask for a dime from any of you. Freely I receive, freely I give. And believe me, children, I am well supplied. Like the great apostle Paul said, I know how to abound, I know how to abase, I know how to have everything and have nothing at all, but whatever state I am, I am therewith content. Quit borrowing. It's a commandment. All praise to the Most High. AHAYAH.